Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm bringing you your new moon forecast for this Monday. So July 20th, around 10:33 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to have the moon and the sun coming together in sidereal Cancer. This new moon is really interesting because it happens in the nakshatra of Pushya, which is right in the middle of Cancer, so it's fully in Cancer. Some of the stars, the nakshatras, bridge two signs. So we often see that there's a star that is coming from one sign to the next. In the case of Gemini to Cancer, it's Purnavasu. And the majority of this new moon phase is actually in Purnavasu, and even some of it's in Gemini itself. So it's not even in Cancer until the morning of the 20th. The phase of the moon will last the whole cycle prior to actually coming into exact degrees of the sun and the moon being together. So each phase of the moon has its start point and then it has its end point. And when we talk about the new moon, we talk about the full moon, it's when those are coming in exact degrees together. So it's the end of the titi, or the phase. So this, like I said, this one is happening in Pushya, but it's at 4 degrees of Cancer. So it's right after it turns to Pushya. So the majority of the phase that we're fading out of and getting into the starting point is actually Purnavasu. And this is where the Earth Mother is born. This is coming after a calamitous event, a huge storm, and a bringing down of the Creator himself. This really sort of tragic and heroic and, really calamitous event occurring, and the end game of that, or the end story of that, is that the Earth Mother Aditi is born, and she is born to bring back the light. That's literally what Purnavasu is. It's the return of the light, and it can also be translated into like repeating patterns. So it shows this quality of destruction that then brings new birth, new life. And Aditi then became the mother of all life here on Earth. And so that quality is here in this new moon as well. And then as the mothering quality develops, first it's like, okay, we've got to birth this thing. If you've ever, if you are a mother, I'm a mother, you go through this whole period of time where you're carrying your child and you're nurturing your child in the womb, and that you're a mother in all of that time. And when you birth the child, you're a mother that is entering the next phase of mothering. And as soon as that baby's born, it's like it needs food, it needs nourishment, and that's what Pushya is. Pushya is the nourisher. Pushya is where we care for and tend for our young, or for anything that is like our young, anything that we're offering that unconditional love to. The planet Jupiter is exalted in Pushya because it's showing where our teachings, our wisdom, our higher beliefs really excel and shine when we are coming from a motherly, unconditionally loving place, when what we devote ourselves to and what we believe in is love, unconditional love, nurturance, feeding others. And when we feed others, we ourselves get a different kind of food. So there's a very interesting story of Brihaspati, who is Jupiter, basically. He's the counselor, he's the guide. And he is chosen to sort of receive this food from the Earth Mother. What happens is the earth becomes barren at some point. There's no food, it's dry, there's no water, nothing's growing, and the beings that are on the earth at this point have just been taking, and they're not giving back. They're not also nurturing the earth. So the king, Prithu, that comes to earth to sort of chastise the Earth Mother for not offering more of herself and giving more of herself when she's not being appreciated, valued, or respected, or even used for good purposes. So even her bounty is not being used to, say, offer blessings to the deities or to the gods. She's not, it's the milk is not being used to be offered in the fire for prayer. Everything's being misused and appropriated, and it's not going where it's supposed to go, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So she just cuts it all off and dries out the earth. And this king comes and basically takes a bow and arrow and points it at her and says, you need to produce some food. Give us food now. And she does things in this very feminine way where she turns herself into a cow and she walks away. And he then follows her, and is like, give me food or I will kill you. And she's like, well, what will happen if you kill me? Like, I am the earth. You won't have any food then either. So she finally submits because her nature is to just give and to nourish. And he's one of her children, even if he's being rude. So she says, I tell you what, bring me a calf and I'll nurture it. My nature is to nurture my children. So bring me a calf. I'm a cow, bring me a calf. And so he brings her a calf, which is really the original human. And so Manu as a calf gets fed, and she, nourishes. And then they start with the sages, and she nourishes. And then the priests bring Brihaspati to her, and she nourishes. And all of her nourishment turns to what they need. So they need food, and in the case of Brihaspati, they need prayers, they need mantras. He's the priest, he's Jupiter, and they need to remember what it is that the point of all of this is, that if they're not offering their prayers, if they're not first offering their food up to the heavens, if they're just eating and consuming, then they're missing the point. So this is how we bring ourselves back into righteousness, not just with the earth, but with God and with the Godhead and with our prayers and our intentions and what we're doing. So that's the story of Pushya. And Pushya is also represented by the cow's udders and the human breasts. So it is literally a star of giving food and nourishing. And we see this cycle repeat itself again and again, just like Purnavasu is that repeating patterns. We see where there's destruction and chaos, and then new light comes and we feel renewed and something can begin again. But then of course humanity comes in and makes it, makes that go awry, and we have to recreate or fix what's going on. And we can fix with force. We can try and take a bow and arrow, we can try to shoot something down, which is what happens in the nakshatra previous to Purnavasu in Ardra. We can take force to fix things, but at the end of the day, we catch more flies with honey, where the force can only make it so much. The force can't change the mind. The force can't change the heart. The force can only force a body to do something, but the mind and the heart are ultimately going to need to be changed from the inside out. There's going to need to be something that is loving, that compels us to move in a different direction. And how can we have loving feelings and devotional feelings towards something that is not right? That's not, we can't have loving and devotional feelings about destruction of the earth. We can only have loving and devotional feelings about giving back or caring for. Just for the Earth Mother, the only thing she could nourish was a child, a baby calf. She couldn't just nurture this man in front of her with a bow and arrow who was a king. That wasn't going to be what would fix the problem. So this is something that we need to note in our own lives, and really recognize places where we are using the wrong kind of force, where we're trying to physically make something be a certain way. Maybe it's an opinion or a thought or an idea. Maybe we're, forcing our thoughts on other people and saying this is how it is, and cutting it out. Maybe we're doing this in in whatever way in our own life, or in our, I see it right now. We're living in a very virtual world right now, since so much of it's taking place online. So you see this happening on Facebook quite a lot. You see, not as much maybe on Instagram, but you see this happening I don't do Twitter, but I definitely know that that's happening there too, where people are arguing and really just like slamming their point in, like, this is my point, boom, boom, cancel, you know, I'm out. And they're not changing anyone's mind. So whatever the point is of getting that, you're just either standing up on a soapbox or saying something, but nothing's actually changing as a result of this. And the force being used, you know, I just saw a recent example that comes to the top of my head of the, you know, these unmarked vans sort of pulling protesters off the street in Portland and tormenting them, or whatever is actually happening to these people. They're being tormented because they're, you know, not knowing where they are, they have no idea, and they don't know what's happening to them, or something like that. I don't know if there's actual, you know, torture happening, but it's more like the not knowing is tormenting. And the, you know, the fact that it is a government called operation that's occurring. Well, that can happen, you know. I mean, these troops can come in. We can have different government officials decide that they want to use force on the population, but that's not going to actually make people stop protesting. And that, in fact, it's going to incite more. It's not going to stop anything. It's going to incite more. So that's really where we're at right now. We're at that crux. You know, we've sort of had this tumultuous war and this, you know, all this crazy back and forth and fighting and all this stuff. And we need to tap into the part of us that's more motherly and that's less forceful, and that isn't running away, but is instead standing ground and saying, hey, you know what, I'll feed you, but you have to, you know, you have to submit to being like a child. You know, you can't, this idea that we're just gonna, you know, forever. Another example of this I see a lot is a lot of Black leaders who are sort of done with schooling white people on Black Lives Matter. They're just over it, and they are like, if you want to learn, become like a child and learn, you know, go and suckle at the teat of history, but don't ask me to do the work for you. You know, don't ask me, don't come up and demand that I tell you how things can be different, or just deny that it's, you know, that it's this way at all. So there's a lot of different versions of this playing out right now, and I'm sure any one ideological stance could find their way in which this fits into their, you know, into their storyline and their confirmation bias at this moment. That's not the point. I'm not here to argue this or that or the other. I'm just here to say, like, to sort of illuminate what it is we're going through right now and how you can find it playing out in the social world around you, and also on your own personal level. You know, in what ways are you maybe taking more than you need, or kind of just expecting this well to give, or in what ways are you nurturing, and are you somebody who's in a position to offer and nurture and give to others? So that's really the awareness we can bring in this new moon, and it's the beginning of it, right? It's the very fresh into the nakshatra when the new moon starts. So we haven't been nurturing already for so long that we're all tapped out. We're just recognizing, we're like at the point where birth happens and you realize, like, oh my God, you know, that 9 months was nothing. Even birth itself was nothing compared to the rest of this child's life that I'm going to be nurturing it. You know, compared to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the first 6 months of life. And then from there, going forward, have constantly giving myself to this being because of no reason other than just this crazy unconditional love I have for them. So that's the place we're at, where it's like the awakening of like, wow, that was nothing. You know, this is like, creating is easy peasy compared to nurturing and giving your all. Another really interesting story about this sort of subject is these African social spiders that I've been learning about with my son, and they are this social grouping of spiders. They live together, and the males mature really fast. The females don't mature that fast. So the males are ready to impregnate the females before half the females are even there at the sexually mature state. So half the females get impregnated and then the males die. And the other half of the females who were not quite mature enough to get impregnated end up acting as surrogate mothers. So both sets of female spiders, the ones who actually birthed the children and the ones who did not, end up nursing these children, giving them this special, milk. It's spider milk, whatever. It's, it's juices that come out of them. And they feed and feed and feed these tiny little babies. Well, at some point, they give so much of themselves that their body starts to liquefy and break down and no longer work. So they're dying because they're giving so much of themselves. And eventually, the babies just start to feed on the bodies of their mothers and their surrogate mothers because they're dying anyway, and that's kind of the rest of their food. So it's kind of disgusting, and I apologize if it disturbs you, but it's an interesting story or interesting fact, because if we give too much, and anyone who's ever nursed a baby knows, it's like, wow, you really are giving a lot of yourself. You have to constantly put more in order to get it. And really it requires a village of people feeding you and helping you and nourishing and replenishing you in order for you to be able to continue giving to your children. And if everyone in the village is either dead or also giving their everything to the kids, and there's thousands and thousands of babies, it's not just one baby, then it literally, the female body is just broken down and disintegrates and just becomes food in and of herself. And it's sort of this just resignation to the flow of life. So if we want it to continue to propagate, we want to continue to have food, we want to continue to have nourishment on planet Earth, we need to continue to care for Mother Earth. If we want a mother to be able to care for a child, we need to care for mothers. If we want our own self in whatever capacity we're nurturing to be able to continue doing that, we need to feed ourselves. If you're a teacher, you need to also maintain your status as a student. You need to constantly learn. If you're a chef, you need to eat yourself. Whatever it is you're doing here on this earth, you need to constantly be putting back in to the tank, as well as offering and giving out. And those who are taking need to recognize that. They need to realize that there will be nothing left if they take it all. So anyway, those are my two stories to illustrate Pushya. And the other things that are going on right now are mostly the same as we've had. So the sun has just moved into Cancer also. It's at 4 degrees obviously for the new moon. So we're really just moving into this cycle, and it's very different from the Gemini cycle of cerebral facts and figures and objectivity, and let's play devil's advocate, and let's be funny and humorous, and also really, really Rahu-y, since the North Node is there, and just kind of blow things up and post them all over the place. We're moving into a place where our soul and our heart and our mind are wanting to nurture and wanting to connect to our feelings, and not wanting to just blast everything all over the place as much. We're wanting to be in a more centered place, and a more really feeling into whether or not something is true or not, because we have we have we can kind of debate any side of things, which is why I said I'm not going to debate this idea or that idea. I'm just going to put out examples, and they happen to be whatever examples most recently showed up on my feed. But the truth is, you could make a case for any fact being right or wrong. I mean, there's so much facts out there, so many details you can make. You can assert an opinion, you can gather some data to prove it. Very easy to do, and that's why lawyers have jobs. But the fact of the matter is there's a right and wrong that we know on a deeper level. Maybe it won't win in court, often does not. Maybe it won't follow laws or the judicial system. None of those constructs of man have actually been run through the test of rightness, of true rightness. Those things are used as tools that it really depends on who's the one implementing those tools, who's the one using those tools, as to whether or not they get run through any sort of heart space. But for truth to be truth, it needs to go there. It can't just be something that's like, able to be argued. You could argue anything, but for something to be right, for something to be just, it needs to go through a heart space. It needs to go through a test of the heart. And so that's where we're at right now. All these ideas we have, and all these opinions we have, and all these beliefs, and all this stuff that's been really fueling so much over the last year and a half, right now we're in the cycle where we have a chance to really anchor into our heart space and feel what feels right. Not what your main group of friends believe or your family taught you, or what you're rebelling against that your family taught you, or whatever the many different stories we each have in our lives are, but not the best meme, or the thing that you just want to think because that's what you think, but really through the heart space. And it requires checking in with yourself a lot in your own space, and it requires, if you're making opinions or assertions about others, that you're checking in with their heart space. It requires a humbling that comes when truth and righteousness, those qualities of Jupiter, or when unconditional love is at the center focus. When the goal is to keep something alive, like a child, everything else sort of goes out the window. It's not, you kind of, all your beliefs or whatever you read or whatever you thought, it kind of shifts and changes into the moment in front of you and the being in front of you. And the truth of that moment, minus all the other noise, is that you're keeping this person alive, or you're nurturing them, or they're crying and you need to fix that. And so research and knowledge and facts and information help us get there, but they mean nothing if they can't get rooted into the heart space. So that's really what we're about right now. And so we also have Saturn giving direct drishti here to our moon and sun, and it's literally in the same degrees. It's retrograde, and it's at 4 degrees in his own sign. And the moon, of course, is in her own sign, where we feel a lot more peace and a lot more ease and a lot more comfort with our mind. Saturn is more fearful and more constrictive and more pressure-based, but in his own sign, it's like appropriate fear. It's appropriate pressure. It's the pressure that you need to have because the reality is there, because the reality of death is there, the reality of time is there, the reality of needing to work hard in a specific direction is there. Now, it's retrograde, so it's not as proactive, it's more internalized. And since it's reflecting itself onto the moon, and the moon is reflecting back, moon and sun are both reflecting back to it, we see that it's the quality of pressure and fear is really going to be more internalized. And one of the great qualities of Saturn, when we truly find ourselves humbled and we truly find ourselves living in a space of detachment from outside results, we become the great meditator. That's what Saturn is at its highest, the great meditator. So hopefully in our effort to find more peace in our heart, we become more quiet. We become more able to take moments of not just nurturance for ourselves, but this quiet, which is like mental nurturance, where we're not engaging so much. We're taking like a time out for ourselves. So that is a really powerful drishti that we're experiencing, and it is two ways. You'll see that quality of Cancer moon and Cancer sun shining also to that Saturn, perhaps allowing us to meditate in a bedroom on a couch, or in a bedroom on a bed, or in a couch or something, or in water instead of in a cell on the floor, hardwood, offering us that option to sort of nurture as well in our space and not be so rigid and so harsh. Rahu and Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, are still in Gemini, and Mercury is about halfway through in that destructive space of Ardra. So our verbiage, our words are still in that place where we're sort of taking down the creator. We're throwing our arrows, we're shooting our guns, and we might even be the ones getting taken down ourselves. But it's not where our heart, our soul are. It's not where our true placement is anymore. We're not fully vested in it anymore. It's kind of just like word games at this point. So that's a big shift to understand. Mars is continuing drishti on Mercury, really on Mercury, because Mercury's at 14 degrees and Mars is at 18 degrees. So we see that that verbal onslaught that's coming out still kind of has that bite to it, that Mars bite. So we have to be careful of that. We have to be aware. The reason we know these things, the reason we want to know these things is so that we're aware, so that we just have more awareness. It doesn't mean we can always stop it before the words fly out of our mouth or before whatever, but once we're sort of aware of something, we can pull back, maybe even apologize, but always reflect on, I just did that, and the more we stop ourselves, the more we notice ourselves, the more we reflect on our actions, our words, our thoughts, the more we are able to shift that and move it into more the direction we want it to go, more the direction of what we're trying to be, trying to do, trying to be, to the karma we're trying to create here. So that's something to think about. At the end of this month, on July 31st, in the evening hours here in Pacific Standard Time, so on August 1st in further away time zones, later time zones, we have Venus moving out of her own sign of Taurus. So Venus has been here for like almost 6 months. We've had our planet of happiness and relations and relationships in her own sign of Taurus, where we're able to, really try to find harmony and find what makes us happy in our daily routines, in our gardening, in our art making, in our bath taking, in our beautifying of our home, in our cooking, and all those kind of things that Taurus brings us to, the really earthy nature of pleasure and the really, tactile quality of making your needs met in a very sensuous, beautiful way. And once Venus moves into Gemini, we still have that quality of getting along, because Gemini is where we want to communicate with our partners, and we want to find common ground, but it's through ideas that we want to find the common ground in Gemini. It's through this mental realm, not through the sensuous physical realm. So that's something to understand, where we might start to take those ideas and really try to find peace in them, try to find a quality of harmony and even beauty and functionality in our conversations, as opposed to just saying stuff just because it's fun to spray it all over the place and just kind of see what happens when we post that meme or that statement or that whatever incendiary thing that maybe we didn't even realize was incendiary. We just thought was funny. So that is going to shift, and Mercury will also shift a little bit after that into Cancer. So we're seeing that the planets are kind of beginning to make this new turn. We're moving out of the nodal space we've been in for a really long time, and at the end of September, the nodes will actually switch signs, and we'll see Rahu move into Taurus, and we'll see Ketu move into Scorpio, and we'll sort of really step out of this massive information, belief, bias axis that we've been in for now a year and a half. And it's been a very challenging time for us, because globally and socially in each individual country, but also you can see it sort of spread out over all the countries, this was a real sensitive zone for us, this area of beliefs versus information and ideas and the news and the media and the facts versus the fake facts and and the deep-rooted beliefs that it all comes from. This is a very sensitive spot for society. Individually it is. Within families you see that being a big stoking point, especially as families start, as people start to move away from their families more and more, with the internet, with the traveling, with people moving out of, away from their homeland so much, we see people's values and beliefs really start to shift away from the ones they were raised with. But just as they shift doesn't mean that they shift the root of it. Doesn't mean that they really have shifted the root. So this Rahu Ketu, especially recently with Ketu and Mula in the nakshatra of uprooting and pulling it out by the roots, we've really started to see some, the gaping holes that are left as we rip out the roots of our beliefs. The people who are really resistant to doing that, or really don't even want to look at their beliefs, the strong confirmation bias we all have when we take in information, the willingness to just spew out anything, whether we have really thought about it or run it through any kind of rigorous testing, be it, you know, heart space that we're running it through, or be it actual science. You know, the willingness to just say stuff. I mean, recently I've had conversations with people that just crack me up, even about my own self. Someone will say, oh, this is what I think about this. And I say, oh, well, this is what I was actually thinking in that moment. And they're like, I don't care. I'm still going to think of it the way I thought of it. And it's like, even my own experience being just, you know, someone just blatantly saying, I don't really care what your experience actually was. The way I want to look at your experience is this way. And so that's what I'm going to do. It's like, okay, I mean, I don't care. I think it's funny. I mean, I'm an astrologer, so I think it's all kind of a little bit funny to watch from that removed perspective of seeing what's at play. But if you think about that happening again and again and again and again in every room, in every conversation, in every relationship, all around the world, and then the bigger pictures where it's happening, the huge social issues where it's happening, it becomes not as funny, and it becomes something where we're literally happily accepting of lies at this point. We're almost begging to live in delusion, and that is worrisome, for sure. It is a point in time when reality has become so far stretched that we don't really even know how to identify it anymore. So this Cancer cycle is really important for us to move into that space again, where we're actually connecting with our heart space and what matters. Because if you do connect with your heart space, you might find that you actually care what someone's actual experience is, or you might have more of that things might come up from you from a different perspective than just filling whatever thing you thought was funny or whatever confirmation bias you had. You might really, really want to connect with another human. And in doing so, you're almost always going to make yourself vulnerable and find them vulnerable. And in that vulnerability is where you start to find the real love, and you start to find the real truth. Because once people are not defensive, then real information starts to come out and real truths start to come out when people aren't feeling defensive. When there's a lot of defensiveness, when there's a lot of offensiveness, offense might look like truth sometimes because it's, spraying out all the things you've always wanted to say, but it's heated and it's got a trajectory and it doesn't have any kind of checks and balances. So it can become false really quick. It might start on a true fire passion of emotion, but it usually goes wayward somewhere along the way. Defensiveness almost never has truth at its core. It's almost always the goal is just to get away from whatever it is that's attacking, and in any means necessary. So it's rarely going to be really strongly based in any kind of truth. So this is all just stuff to reflect on as we move into this Cancer cycle, and hopefully you're nourishing yourself, giving yourself lots of opportunities to be in water. Beautiful water sign that Cancer is. The crab likes to walk away, sidestep something that's a little bit too controversial, a little bit too aggressive. That's okay. We don't have to head on everything. Sometimes the best course of action is to walk away, and just take care of yourself, because you're not going to have anything to give if you keep giving to all the wrong people, or you keep giving to everybody who wants to tap into your energy. You want to specifically choose those, like the Earth Mother did. Bring me a calf, bring me the chief of the priests, bring me somebody who's actually going to turn this into something for everyone else too, as opposed to just giving to all the wild hordes of hyenas that come to your door to take. So that's, there's a strong level of discernment necessary as well. So I hope this is helpful, and I will see you real soon. Namaste.